Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, From Assessing Flood Risks to Taking Action. My name is Bo. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a project officer with the Green Municipal Fund, and I will be your host for today. I am joined by my teammates Sandrine and Mohammed, and they'll be working on the back end of things on the production of today's webinar. And that means if you have any technical issues during the webinar, you are really encouraged to reach out directly to Sandrine through the Zoom chat. And to help you find Sandrine, to message Sandrine, Sandrine's going to post in the chat, and she already has those instructions as well. I am muted. Nope. Never mind. Thank you. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. I'd like to start by taking a moment to acknowledge that the lands upon which I live, work, and play have served and continue to serve as the traditional lands for many peoples over time, including the Adirondack and the Haudenosaunee. This is Treaty 3 lands, which is also known as the Between the Lakes Treaty, held by the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And I encourage anyone who wishes to share where they're joining from to do so in the chat right now. And I also encourage you to, as you do that, reflect upon what you know about the history of those lands and to think about and find ways to continue to grow and share that knowledge. Could I have the next slide, please? So before I introduce our wonderful speakers for today, there are a few housekeeping items to cover. Today's event will be in English with French interpretation available. If you want to join the French interpretation channel, you can do so by clicking on the button in the lower right of your screen. It looks like a little globe. L'événement d'aujourd'hui se déroulera en anglais. Si vous souhaitez écouter en français, veuillez cliquer sur le bouton d'interprétation. C'est en bas à droite de votre écran. C'est un petit globe et sélectionnez l'option française. We also have two separate slide decks, one in English and one in French. If you want to make sure that you know how to toggle between those or want to make sure you're on the correct slide deck, you need to look at the top of your Zoom window and hover over the very top of the Zoom window and you'll see two little buttons appear. One of them will say English deck, Sandrine. The other one will say Diapo en français. And you can switch between those. That becomes more important as we progress through the presentation when the slides are no longer bilingual, but they become one language or the other. So do take a moment to get oriented to that. You'll see on the slide that we have two presentations today. We're going to save our questions for the very end of the webinar. So please do, as we progress through the webinar and as we're listening, post your questions in the Q&A box so that we can take them up to the best of our ability at the end. And I will also encourage you to post any reactions in the chat. Could I have the next slide, please? So we have two presentations, and the lovely smiling faces you see on your screen now are our guest speakers. I'm thrilled to introduce them to you now. We have Dr. Annabella Bonata and Catherine Backus from the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo. Annabella and Catherine will be diving into the value of a structured framework to assess community flood risks and to inform managing those local risks. They'll also be showcasing a tool that provides that structured framework for that risk assessment process. We also have Chris Nechikov from the City of Kitchener, who will be sharing his team's learnings and successes through their implementation of the city's integrated stormwater management master plan. Could I have the next slide, please? We do have a little bonus presentation for you in addition to the other two. That's tied to the Green Municipal Fund work. And I highlight that because today's webinar is actually part of a broader webinar series hosted by the Green Municipal Fund, also known as GMF. And I'm about to pass the floor over to my colleague, Charlene, who is going to share an upcoming GMF funding opportunity that we thought this audience would be keen to hear about because it funds adaptation work, including adaptation projects and flood resilience projects. So I'll ask for the next slide and for Charlene to take the floor.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you here today. So, I'm just going to give a very, very high level overview of the funding opportunities that we have in climate adaptation. So, here on the slide, this is just a big list of all the projects we have, all the programs we offer funding for in the mitigation aspect. And I'm going to talk about adaptation now. Next slide. So, well, we have some different is it me that can control the next slide or someone else? Ah, perfect. Thank you. So in LLCA, we have two different programs. We have climate ready plans and processes. So this is to do your adaptation plans, risk assessments. And then for adaptation and action, we have two different streams. We can do feasibility studies and also capital projects, implementation projects up to $1 million. Next slide, please. So for CRPP, there are plans up to $70,000 for depending on your size of municipality. But as I was saying, these are risks, adaptation plans, risk assessments. Next slide, please. Funding can go up to $140,000 depending on your size. Then for adaptation and action, as I was saying, feasibility studies and implementation. Next slide, please. So as I was saying, for the implementation, there are projects that go up to $1 million, not surpassing 1 million, a minimum cost share of 60% that can go all the way up to 100%. For feasibility studies, these are specifically in line for your implementation projects, 80% covered to a maximum of $70,000. Next slide, please. So all of these offers are going to be opening very shortly. They're now announced on our website. So we have a spring intake and then a fall intake. And just to note that for CRPP for the plans, it's one project per municipality. And for the AIA, it's 1 to 3 projects per municipality, depending on your size. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, my contact information is going to be dropped in the chat. Feel free to reach out to book a meeting or to send us some emails with your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Charlene. That was a quick and furious overview. As Charlene noted, if you take a look in the chat, you'll find links that Sandrine posted to find more information and to book an appointment. Could we have the next slide, please? All right. I will now open the floor to both Annabella and Catherine to take us on a municipal flood risk in action learning journey.
Well, thanks so much, Bo. Really appreciate that lovely introduction. And as Bo mentioned, my name is Catherine Backus, and my colleague, Dr. Annabella Bonata, and I are very happy to be with you all today to discuss the training series the Green Municipal Fund and the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation have worked on together in regards to building flood resilience at your community levels. Now, before we jump in, I want to offer a little bit of background on the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation. So for those of you unfamiliar, the Intact Center, we are an applied research center housed out of the University of Waterloo that helps homeowners, communities, businesses, and all levels of government reduce risks associated with climate change and extreme weather events. So our key areas of focus are flooding, wildfire, and extreme heat. And so for our conversation today, we're going to focus on flood risk. What research has been completed to understand the impact on Canadians and Canadian communities, but more importantly, what resources and tools are available to help us get flood risk out of the system. So with that, I'm going to jump right into why these risks are increasing. Next slide, please. So we know from authoritative bodies such as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and Environment and Climate Change Canada, the first two reports on the left, that a certain degree of climate change is already baked into the system, and therefore it is in fact irreversible. We can slow down the rate of change, but we cannot reverse it. And so the global consensus is, well, greenhouse gas emissions must fall. Yet, according to the United Nations Environment Program, their emissions gap report, the third report that you see here, finds that climate pledges have only slightly lowered global temperature rise, leaving the world heading for serious escalation of climate risks. So strategies to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, these are imperative and they have to continue. But climate change will continue to be present well into the future. And so adaptation, building resilience at the level of our homes, communities, and across our businesses, that needs to be a much more important part of the climate change discussion. And yet, we also know from the United Nations Environment Program, their adaptation gap report, the last report on the slide, finds that adaptation financing, planning, and implementation are all plateauing. We are not putting enough resources towards adaptation globally and here in Canada. And yet, we also know that for every dollar that we put into place for adaptation, will save us on average $2 to $10 in cost avoidance over a 10-year period. So climate adaptation, it is the cost-effective strategy. And without it, the costs associated with climate change and extreme weather will continue to increase. So what are those costs? Next slide, please. So there is no better witness of the costs of climate change and extreme weather than the catastrophic insurable losses for Canada. So a cat loss is any event, flood, wildfire, hailstorm, that triggers $30 million or more of insured losses. So between 1983, which is the start of the graph, to 2008, which is just outside of that gray boxed region, losses range from approximately $400 to $700 million per year for extreme weather events. From 2009 onward, within that gray boxed region, losses now average $2.8 billion per year. 2024 losses reached 9.2 billion, ranking it the worst loss year in Canadian history. 2025, well, that was a little bit of a quieter year at 2.4 billion, still a very big number. But you can actually still see the trend line. It's increasing faster and faster year over year. Now, what's really important to note is that these are insurable losses. So this is what all insurance companies in Canada pay for extreme weather risk. But that's not all of the economic losses within the system. The rule of thumb here in Canada is multiplied by the amounts that you see here on this graph by 3 to 4 times. And what you get is uninsured losses. So that's money coming out of the pockets of individuals, businesses, and governments. And that's a lot of money. Now, without fail, year over year, flooding is the costliest extreme weather event. We know, according to the Insurance Bureau of Canada, that 10% of the Canadian housing market is now uninsurable for flood risk. And in 2023, Desjardins Financial stopped offering mortgages in certain high-risk flood zones in Quebec. So now what we're seeing is these cascading and eroding effects throughout our economy. And it's not just the uninsurability, it's the stability of the Canadian housing market. Next slide, please. So this is really where the Intact Center's report, Treading Water: Impact of Catastrophic Flooding on Canada's Housing Market, really comes into play. So this was the first ever quantitative analysis in Canada investigating the impact flooding has on the Canadian housing market. And this slide highlights the results quite well, but in short, homes located in flooded communities. Now listen to my wording there. Homes located in flooded communities. The home itself did not need to be flooded out. It only needed to be stigmatized by the community that had flooded out. So homes located in flooded communities compared to their non-flooded counterparts saw on average across Canada an 8.2% reduction in the sold price of their homes. 44% less homes were listed on the market in flooded communities. And when homes were listed on the market, they stayed there approximately 20% longer. So most people's largest investments, their homes, are being devalued because of flood risk at the community level. And these are just the financial costs. Next slide, please. So in 2017, our team at the Intact Centre conducted interviews with households that experienced basement flooding in Burlington, Ontario, which 3 years prior, in 2014, experienced a very severe precipitation event that resulted in 3,300 homes being flooded out. What we determined is that flooded household members continued to experience significantly higher worry and stress every single time precipitation events occurred compared to their non-flooded counterparts, and took on average 7 days off of work post-flood event. So lost time from work, psychosocial stressors associated with medication uptake, these are material social impacts. And what I'm trying to show here is that extreme weather does not just have financial, but mental health costs as well. And for any of you who might be interested, the Intact Centre is actually doing a second iteration of this report where we've actually partnered with a publicly traded life and health insurance company to determine post-flood if homeowners, if individuals are utilizing more drugs, therapy, and taking more time off of work. And that report should be released in the coming months. So please keep an eye out. Next slide, please. So I know I've given you a lot of bad news. I promise Annabella will have some better news once I flip it over to her. But I did actually want to leave you with good news because there is good news. And the good news is that guidance, standards, resources, and tools have already been developed. We know what to do across Canada. That work has been done to understand what we need to do to reduce extreme weather risk. So our team at the Intact Center has worked with standard setting bodies as well as subject matter experts across Canada to develop practical, meaningful, and cost-effective ways to adapt to the physical risks of climate change. Please know everything that you see here. It's freely available. If you have any questions, please, we're always a resource. Reach out to us. We're always happy to help. But just very quickly, on this slide, I've provided guidelines to reduce the risk of flooding at the level of the home, various levels of community, commercial real estate, and the importance of retaining and restoring natural infrastructure, such as wetlands, grasslands, and forested areas. Sorry, if you could just go back for a second to the slide before. And just very quickly, not for our conversation today, but in regards to wildfire, we've also worked with Fire Smart Canada to develop wildfire protection measures at the level of the home and community. And we've also investigated the impact of extreme heat on infrastructure and services, the economy, natural systems, and community health. So with that review of the Intact Center and our research and resources, I'm going to hand it over to Annabella to dive into our municipal flood checkup. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Catherine. So now we can go to the next slide and click through until all the wording appears for the slide. Thank you. So as Catherine mentioned, we're here to really focus on flooding, and the Intact Center a few years ago developed the Municipal Flood Risk Checkup, which is a free tool that we based off of ISO 3100, which is an internationally recognized risk management framework. So the checkup helps municipalities of any size take a structured approach to understand and reduce flood risk, whether or not they have flood expertise in-house. That's important because flood risk is complex and many communities are trying to make decisions with limited capacity, with very little information, and they have competing priorities, as we all know very well. At the core of the tool is risk assessment. So this helps municipalities understand where they may be exposed to intense rainfall, river, and coastal flooding. It helps them identify vulnerabilities and how prepared they currently are for that, and where there may be gaps in their preparedness. It also helps track progress over time. So this is not just a one-time exercise. It's meant to support better planning, funding, and investment decisions, while aligning local action with broader adaptation goals. In short, it gives communities a practical starting point for understanding risk and deciding where to act. Next slide, please. So the checkup is grounded in existing Canadian standards and guidance for flood resilience. As Catherine mentioned, when she showed all the reports that we've published, we work very closely and off of standards. And this matters because flood risk management happens at multiple scales, so from individual homes to entire watersheds. And municipalities play a central role across all these scales. In recent years, Canada has developed a growing body of flood resilience standards, and they've done this through rigorous expert-led processes. They've engaged collaborated with the public and private sectors. And so these standards provide a strong and credible foundation for the checkup. That means that municipalities don't need to start from scratch. Next slide, please. So what is the checkup? The checkup is a self-assessment, and it's an Excel sheet that you can download online that's organized around 50 structured questions across 3 sections. The first section looks at flood hazard and exposure. Essentially, it's asking where risk may exist in your community. For example, a question will look at the history of flooded buildings in the community. The second examines preparedness, meaning how well the municipality understands and analyzes those risks. For example, are climate projections considered when analyzing flood risk? And the third section focuses on reducing that risk. So looking at what actions and measures are actually in place. For example, does your community have a climate adaptation plan? So together, these sections move from identifying risk to understanding risk to acting on it. Next slide, please. So there are two key concepts in the checkup that it's good to know, flood exposure and flood preparedness. So exposure is about what may be affected by flooding. So this can include people, infrastructure, ecosystems, and any other assets in your community. Preparedness is about the steps a municipality has taken to anticipate, reduce, respond to, and recover from those flood events. So in practice, the results that you get from the checkup may point to gaps in areas such as stormwater planning, emergency preparedness, land use policy, asset management, or public communication. Reducing those risks may involve both physical measures, so this can be anything from using built and natural infrastructure that slows or stores water, absorbs water, diverts it away from your community, and non-structural measures, such as how you plan, your planning policies, incentives that you provide in your community, and public communication. So the important point here is that flood risk management is ongoing. So under ISO 3100, which I mentioned the checkup is based around, it's meant to improve over time through communication, consultation, monitoring, review, and reporting. So if you get a low exposure score or a high preparedness score, which means your community is doing pretty good for flood preparedness, this doesn't mean that risk has been eliminated. It means that there's a stronger foundation for continued action. And so you should continue to do the checkup at least once a year. Next slide, please. So one of the bigger reasons why we're here today is that together with the Green Municipal Fund, the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation developed a free 1-hour asynchronous video training series to help municipal staff use the municipal flood risk checkup. This is important because the goal is not just to provide a tool, but to help users build the knowledge and confidence to use it effectively. The learning journey gives municipal staff a step-by-step way to access the checkup, work through the training videos, and apply the results at local planning and decision making. And you can access it using that QR code. Next slide, please. When the next slide comes up, you'll see, oh, there was some wording there. What the training series includes. So it has 3 parts. The first part is really there meant to help you get oriented to the tool and understand why flood risk matters. The second part walks through how to complete each section of the checkup, from identifying exposure to understanding preparedness and reducing risk. And part 3 focuses on using those results. So it includes how to interpret your scores, examples of adaptation in action, and identifying the next steps for your community. So overall, the training is designed to move users from understanding to application. Next slide, please. So this initiative, as mentioned, is offered through the Green Municipal Fund. It's delivered by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And this is important because it shows that this work is part of a broader national effort to help municipalities strengthen resilience. The checkup and training series are intended to make flood resilience more accessible, practical, and actionable for communities across Canada. And this QR code that you see here, and I think there will also be a link in the chat, is a survey that the Intact Center is putting out, asking if you'd be willing to sign up for a follow-up survey. So this would be the form to fill out if we could follow up with you, just to hear if you're using the municipal flood risk checkup, what you're thinking of it, if you could provide some feedback. So we would love to contact you in a few months. So if you're willing, please leave your contact information in the form through that QR code. So thank you so much.
Thank you to both Catherine and Annabella. That was wonderful. I am going to leave it on this slide so that folks have time to grab that QR code. The link is also posted in the chat, so you can find it there. Also, a huge thank you to you both for the collaboration around the video training series. It was spurred by the fact that, and some participants may be aware of this, about a year ago, we partnered with the Intact Center to offer a synchronous training session. And the feedback from the synchronous training session was really positive. Municipalities were very enthusiastic about the tool, and consequently, we're really thrilled to be able to offer the video training series. The tool is incredible. We've had wonderful feedback from municipalities, and by signing up on that forum today, it does not obligate you to use the tool, but it just provides the Intact Center an opportunity to reach out to find out what you thought if you did use it, and it would be really valuable to strengthen the tool over the long term. With that, I will ask for the next slide. And one thing that Annabella did say was that flood risk management is an ongoing process. And so you heard about the risk assessment piece, the constant monitoring, repeating the tool year after year. And Chris is now going to take us through that ongoing work where we're implementing and mainstreaming climate adaptation work into municipal plans and processes. So thank you, Chris, for joining us, and I'll allow you to take it away.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Netchikov from the City of Kitchener, and I look forward to sharing a bit about what the city's doing to support the stormwater management system as it relates to flooding as well. Next slide, please. So I'll be covering an overview of the City of Kitchener, our integrated stormwater management master plan, how we look at the city as a whole when improving our storm network, and sharing some project examples like the Schneider and Shoemaker Creek naturalization. Next slide, please. So the city of Kitchener is located approximately 100 kilometers southwest of Toronto. It's the center of the Tri-Cities, so Waterloo, Cambridge, and Kitchener are together there. And the city has a population of approximately 318,000 people. Next slide. The city also consists of 29 sub-watersheds, and within that, there's approximately 150 stormwater management facilities that are engineered dry ponds, wet ponds, or wetlands. We also have 135 kilometers of water courses. Of those, the city is responsible for 67, and 23% of that is currently concrete or channelized. Next slide. So to manage the stormwater network, the City of Kitchener has a stormwater and sanitary utility, which comprises of approximately 60 staff. On the stormwater side, our primary focus is to address water quantity, quality, and protect public safety, as well as mitigate damage to infrastructure and property as well. Next slide, please. So to help identify and plan our work, the city goes through a reoccurring stormwater management master plan. Next slide. So at a high level, you can see that our stormwater master planning process roughly follows a 10-year cycle. Our first integrated stormwater master plan was approved in 2016. It was implemented a year later in 2017. And we've received the Disaster Mitigation Adaptation Fund from the Government of Canada, which boosted our capacity to implement the rest of the plan. And so we're currently set to have the next iteration, the Stormwater Master Plan, ready for 2027. And so the 2016 master plan focused primarily on water quality improvements and solutions. But in 2027, our update will allow us to round out our understanding of the system by putting a spotlight on water quantity. So we'll find out in more detail what's our overland flood risks, and the water quantity focus will help give a better defined sense of the risks that are faced by the non-riparian parts of the city as well. Next slide. So before talking about the 2027 plan, it's important to acknowledge our achievements from the 2016 plan. We monitor the health of our sub-watersheds, and in our latest report card, it showed that 80% of our sub-watersheds or creeks saw an increase in water quality between 2016 and 2020. So that was a big win. We're on track to complete or implement 43 out of 52 projects or programs by 2030, excuse me, including adding 8 new stormwater facilities to Kitchener Parks by 2030 using integrated design and enhanced community engagement. Also rehabilitating 7,300 meters of creek, including the removal of more than 3,000 meters of concrete channel using nature-based engineering solutions. And also 49 kilometers of road reconstruction, which all have stormwater upgrades as well. The 2016 plan also introduced a new stormwater management policy, which led to the industry requirement of retaining 12.5 millimeters of runoff for all new development and city-led projects. And so if the proponent can't meet these requirements for technical reasons, there's a $118,000 per hectare stormwater management fee. And this funding is used to also help further stormwater projects in our priority sub-watersheds. It's also aiding the progression of our projects We've received several funds as well to strengthen our master plan. So I mentioned the DMAF fund, that was 49.9 million, but we also received 3 million from the provincial Build Faster Fund and 800,000 from the FCM Green Municipal Fund. Next slide, please. The 2027 master plan has the following objectives: to advance innovations in stormwater infrastructure, to respond to vulnerabilities and support a resilient community, to reduce flood risks, to adapt to the wetter and wilder storm events driven by climate change, improving water quality and overall ecological health of the Kitchener's creeks, reducing the disproportionate impact of stormwater challenges on specific communities, strengthening and trust of collaboration between the public partners, rights holders, and internal teams, including seeking opportunities to integrate co-benefits, and ensuring ongoing compliance with evolving provincial and federal regulations. And so through our capital design work, we've been integrating the knowledge and priorities of the Mississauga, the Credit First Nations, as well as the Six Nations of the Grand River into our projects. And so we're committing to continuing this work as part of our master planning project process. And we'll also use this to begin building relationships with our local urban Indigenous organizations as well. Next slide, please. So this new master plan will also be utilizing a more impact-informed decision-making lens for planning future projects. We'll have expanded modeling data, which includes hydraulic simulations and flood maps, service data, which will include maintenance and operations calls, demographic data, which will include income and housing type, and lived experience data, which includes interviews and community feedback. And so by modeling the storm sewer network, we'll identify Kitchener areas with the highest overland flood risk hazard. And using this impact-driven lens, we can also understand who will be most affected, so we can design solutions that reduce harm to the most impacted communities. Next slide, please. So in 2016, we developed a 1D storm trunk sewer network model for all the pipes that are 600 millimeters and larger in diameter. This represented only approximately 33% of our network. And this model used a traditional catchment delineation and applied rainfall to predefined areas, but it only gave a high-level analysis of interactions between the riverine flood risks and the storm sewer capacity constraints. So in 2022, the city led a feasibility study to test rain on grid modeling, where rainfall is applied directly to the surface grid using test cases. We demonstrated that building a 1D, 2D hydraulic model is both feasible and beneficial. And so our work showed that while 2D modeling is effective for identifying flood-prone areas, the 1D, 2D modeling is essential for developing targeted engineering solutions to address flooding. However, there's still a significant effort required for that 1D, 2D modeling. And so it's at a lot granular of a level, way more detailed. So we're focusing that only in priority areas throughout the city. Next slide, please. So the city of Kitchener has shifted to be more intentional in planning stormwater projects and looking at each project holistically. So before we look at a project, we look at all the existing uses of the space, whether those are city sanctioned or not. And we work with all of our departments to ensure that the final product meets as many desired outcomes as we can. So for example, we look at the space in terms of the natural environmental impacts, park space and enhanced parks opportunities, existing flood complaints and flood reduction measures to the surrounding properties, as well as future planning or zoning impacts and public transit and city connectivity opportunities. Next slide, please. So historically, our stormwater management practices involved isolating the stormwater infrastructure from the public and getting the water as fast away as possible from the city using concrete. However, we've learned that it's not the best way to deal with stormwater in our area, so we've shifted our practices to retaining and infiltrating the stormwater and allowing for both public and nature connection into our projects. And so by restoring natural creek functions and expanding the width of creeks, we're slowing the flows and reducing the risks of flooding. Next slide, please. The benefits for focusing on these nature-based approaches for stormwater management include water quality improvements, groundwater recharge, opportunities for enhanced biodiversity and habitat creation, and tree canopy increases, which can bring climate resilience. And all these factors add together to enhance aesthetics and promote recreation and community benefits for the final product. We've heard we've heard a lot over the recent years how our First Nations communities and residents both want access to the water, access and connection. And so planning projects with this in mind transforms a project from being a potential big issue with the community to creating a space that everyone will love and use for generations. Next slide. So when we plan our stormwater projects within park spaces, we consider the existing uses of that park, and then we engage the public to shape the parts of that park that can be used, while we stick to inform them about the main stormwater measures that need to be installed but can't be changed. And so this does involve more time and money. However, it brings more community involvement, pride, and future care over the space by those who use the park. And shown here is an example of our Prospect Park project, which we're adding a stormwater management pond to. It's currently undergoing a design right now where we canvass to the community how they currently use the space and what they'd like to see more of in the design. So within our, next slide, please. Within the projects, we look to see how the existing area is impacted during the flood. Or flooding events using the Grand River Conservation Area flood mapping. We also have our own flood modeling, as I mentioned previously. And all of that is to identify areas of undersized infrastructure that we can then look how we can address that in our project. Next slide, please. So we also consider how the project fits within the broader community planning as it relates to zoning, public transit, and community access. And there's a number of plans and studies that highlight our existing transit connectivity through the Trails Master Plan, as well as future planning that our projects can help expedite. So we look at all of these plans and studies when we plan the project to see how we can work with our transportation and planning departments to use our projects to help further their other initiatives as well. So this leads to more of a holistic planning project that does not have to undergo numerous iterations of redesign and construction in the future. Next slide, please. So I'll get into one of our project examples that's more recent and prominent. This one is the Schneider and Shoemaker Creeks Naturalization Project. Next slide. So this project is located at the confluence of the Schneider and Shoemaker Creeks within an old and industrialized area that has very minimal vegetation through the area. And those creeks are conveyed through undersized concrete channels and are surrounded by very tight property lines. So it makes things a little challenging. Next slide. Here's a different look at the area. As you can see, it's a lot of impervious surfaces, a lot of hardscapes in the area, and there's a lot of buildings that are leading right up to the creek boundary there. Next slide. So here you can see how far the floodway goes. Actually, if you hit the next slide, sorry about that. In the current conditions, oh, my bad. Could you go
Sorry,
forward?
which slide? Okay.
Yeah, I think there was a
Oh,
transition on there. Sorry.
no, it's okay. Sorry about that. Is this the slide?
Yeah, and then just hit next. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah. So here you can see how far the floodway goes during the current conditions. And so there'll be a lot of impacts to these properties that are within that floodway during our regional storm event. So in the next slide, what we have seen is due to that severe flood risk and the potential to address many more opportunities in the area that I mentioned previously, the city proposed to expand and naturalize the creek in this spot. So this concept shows how the naturalized creek could look like, as well as how the floodway can be reduced further after those obstructions get removed. Next slide, please. So in 2024, we completed an environmental assessment that had this preferred solution of a full naturalized creek in that area. And this includes spaces for future amenity areas, additional trail routes, and better pedestrian connectivity to our transit hubs as well. And so today we're still finalizing the design, and we expect to begin construction on the phase 1 section, as you can see there, later this year. So that's approximately 900 meters of concrete channel. And 5 buildings have already been removed to date within that study area to pave the way for the naturalization work as well. Next slide, please. So one of our earlier projects here was Filsinger Creek. So this was located upstream of our downtown core. And this is where we naturalized over 1.7 kilometers of creek, and it was completed in 2015. Next slide. This was the existing conditions of the creek. It was a long concrete channel that was located in a greenway, so we had a lot more space to work with. But the project area also had a long multi-use trail that runs along the creek and connects to the city's transit hub, had some wetland areas and community gardens as well. And so the need for this project was more about spreading out the flow to capture the sediment on the creek banks and create fish habitat in the newly created floodplain. Next slide, please. So here you can see what the project looked like during construction. And it was quite a bit different, as you can see already. And then the next slide. And here's what it looked like post-construction. So not only was the creek naturalized, but that trail network was upgraded to meet our current city standards. And there was also improved trail connection to nearby parks. Next slide, please. So another recent project example was our Montgomery Creek rehabilitation. And this project was completed in 2022. Next slide. Here you can see the creek was running through an area, it was a simple straight drainage ditch back in the day. It had no meandering, it was just the grass slopes adjacent to it. Next slide. And here's some more recent pre-construction photos showing the condition of the creek. So the goal was to restore 500 meters of this creek within Wilson Park. And the priority for restoration, was assessed considering degraded water quality, warming of the creek water, which affected fish habitat, loss of fish and wildlife habitats, and increased flooding and erosion. Next slide. So post-construction, we had this nice meander installed. A lot of improvements were made to Wilson Park as well, including a new pedestrian bridge crossing, an upgraded asphalt trail through the park, public seating areas, and 700 new trees and 4,000 new shrubs. We had a major downstream constraint as well with the railway crossings there.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And you can just contact them via Teams.
Yep. And so we'll need to do a second phase of the work to increase the culverts through this railway crossing to sort of realize more of that flood benefit. Next slide, please. So once everything is established, we've seen a lot more fish and wildlife taking to the area here, as well as the trees and vegetation have really grown well. And we've also included step down areas into the creek as well, and wild native edible plants that are now used and loved by the community. And next slide. And so here's a bigger view of the final creek project, as well as you can see the seating there, the step down features and the trail routes. And so this is how it sort of fit within the overall parkscape. So that's just a glimpse of what we're doing here. And I appreciate the time to present to you all. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was fantastic. Really appreciate seeing what you've described as a really holistic approach being implemented. Very comprehensive and ambitious. All the visuals from the projects that have been completed and the diversity of the projects, some with huge constraints, other ones with a few, not quite as many constraints. It's helpful to see that diversity shared here. So really appreciate your sharing all of this today. Sandrine and Mo, if you want to stop screen sharing, we'll transition into our Q&A period. And I will encourage folks to post questions into the Q&A box, and we'll take those as they come in. I did have some questions that were submitted during the registration form, and early on, Chris was covering off some slides to describe the various data collection pieces that went into the work that Kitchener has undertaken. And it actually brings me to a question for the Intact Center, or for Catherine and Annabella. Someone asked early on, and you did address this to a certain degree in your presentation. The question was, what level of data is needed to run the tool? You mentioned the level of expertise that's not needed within a municipality, but I wondered if you might be able to address that question more specifically around what level of data is needed to use the flood checkup tool.
So yeah, we love to say that you don't need to have a lot of information available. So you don't have to have flood maps, for example. So that's something that everybody thinks they need for the tool. But what you do need is maybe some historical knowledge. So some of the first few questions are, like have at least 10% of the buildings flooded in your community. So having some of that knowledge or someone in your municipality that has that. So what we do say is we encourage you, unless you're like a municipality of one, which we have met people like that, if you have many people working in the municipality, is to contact as many as possible and bring them together to do the municipal flood risk checkup. So they might have some of that knowledge of the things that you're looking for. The more that you have, the better. But if not, then as you're filling it out, it'll just kind of make you think of maybe some things that need to be done at the municipality. So just one more example is if you know where equity deserving populations are in your community, and if you don't, maybe that'll encourage you to apply for funding to map where those communities are.
Thank you.
Okay.
And and Catherine, did you? Okay. You're mentioning that bringing together multiple team members reminded me that last year during the synchronous training sessions, during those training sessions, sometimes some municipalities were able to send a couple of staff together or even 3 or 4 sometimes. And those teams really appreciated working together on the tool to answer those questions. One of the questions we had submitted ahead of time ties a little bit into a question I saw in the Q&A. And this question is probably leaning towards for Chris. The question submitted ahead of time, I'll read, and then I'll also read the question in the chat. There are those who believe that the cost to be flood smart is unaffordable. And so taking that into mind, Chris, wondering what your reaction might be to comments like that. But there was also a question in the chat around, have you seen a reduction in your maintenance requirement costs as a result of the naturalized areas? So more just thinking a little bit more holistically about that question around cost benefit.
Yeah, so I think where you note it, like where you note stormwater projects are needed, not just in the flood sense, but as a whole, right? So for water quality and other issues that you're encountering, to plan out where those projects would be, it's more of an incremental cost, I would say, to add more flood proofing and things like that to the project that you already have sort of identified. So I think that's one way where it's not a complete new cost that gets added. It's more how can we use what we're planning already to do to sort of bolster those other benefits that you can realize through that. And we have seen through our maintenance projects of those new naturalized creeks, you're not dealing as much with sort of the same issues in terms of maintenance where you have everything getting washed down the creek and it all ends up at the bottom. It's kind of it's a different maintenance practice that's being used for those, but we're seeing that it's helpful because the way that the natural designs are done is it allows for collection of sediment on the banks and then sort of strengthens the actual creek itself versus just shoots all of the sediment downstream and then you end up with this massive sediment island that you have to deal with later. So those are some maybe perspectives there.
Thank you. Question in the Q&A. I'm also seeing lots of love in the Q&A for the tools and the work that the tools from the Intact Center and also the work that Kitchener is doing. So I'll encourage you to take a look at the praise in the chat as well, the Q&A as well. There is a question about for you, Chris, around planning or measuring for long-term public health impacts of flooding. You mentioned working with the transportation and planning teams. I'm wondering what other teams within the city are part of some of the broader conversations that you might be having when working more broadly around mainstreaming this work.
Wow, yeah. We try to reach out to, uh, I would say, almost every department within the city when we look at planning work. So within this master plan, we've sort of reached out to the entire city departments and seen and interviewed like what are they looking at? What do they see as issues within the city that we can potentially loop into our master planning process, and how does that all work? Um, so we do look at it through that lens, as well as all of the, I mentioned, like we have an official plan, we have our transportation, our trails, and we have various master plans throughout the city that we all try to tie into our stormwater planning as well. Um, so yeah, maybe I'm not sure as it relates to communicable diseases, but we try to loop everything in as we can.
Um, One of the questions that we received ahead of time, and might be for all three of you, um, is more around the idea of addressing flood risks in existing developed areas versus standards for new neighborhoods, but also the idea of it was actually two questions and I'm blending them a little together, but it's about the balance. Sorry, we'll start with one at a time. And it was actually the second question that I was going to put to the Intact Center. The first question is more around thinking, Chris, between existing neighborhoods and future neighborhoods, and if there's any proven strategies for each of those that is part of your integrated stormwater master plan.
Sure, yeah. So I think it's a lot easier to do something with newer neighborhoods because you know you have more of a blank slate that you can work with. And as I mentioned, our stormwater management policy that was created, that sort of in 2016 and onward gave the city in all new development a big bonus to our stormwater measures that were implemented. But the challenge, I think, is more with the older areas. And so that Schneider Shoemaker Creek project, for example, um, that's where it's really you're dealing with a lot more constraints in terms of what's already there and how do you work through that process. Um, but for the master plan, what we're doing is we're trying to canvas, I would say, a lot more of the sort of those older areas, knowing that the stormwater management measures there are very lacking. And we've seen that through our subwatersheds monitoring studies that we've done in 2016. So trying to work from that existing focus and then build more towards the solutions to bring those impacted subwatersheds back up.
If I could just add, Bo, so just at the Intact Center, and again, please, anyone, feel free, go to our website. We have worked with standard setting bodies such as the Standards Council of Canada, the National Research Council, and the Canadian Standards Association. And we have it's in a list form. We know what to be doing at new community design as well as existing community design. Like, what are those key takeaways that we should be looking at when building new and existing communities? For new community design, just as an example, the number one recommendation is to not build on a floodplain. And yet across Canada, flood risk maps are 20 to 25 years out of date. So we actually don't know where there is potential risk in the system. The federal government is taking initiatives through Public Safety Canada to update those flood risk maps and to make them more publicly available. And we have certain provinces, like the province of Ontario, has done really great work having conservation authorities. The conservation authorities, one of their main mandates is to ensure that flood risk maps are up to date. So there, depending on jurisdiction, there is information available. But again, it can be very highly technical in nature, and it can be outdated. So again, I just want to reinforce, we do know what to do. Chris is a great example of the amazing work being done. But we need to ensure that we have updated information to understand where there is the greatest risk in the system.
Thank you, Catherine, for that. I see we have time for one more question, and there's one that was submitted ahead around balancing your focus on managing and helping residents with their lot level risks versus prioritizing municipal assets. And I know that the Intact Center has some resources specifically for residential properties, but I wondered if any one of you three had comments about that balance and thinking about those two different property types.
I think they kind of need to go together. So we like to say the whole of society approach because flooding is like a watershed scale issue. So both with our conservation authorities, the municipality, and the property owners all have a responsibility to reduce risk. So when Catherine showed the slide with all of our resources, there's a 3-step to home flood protection on there, infographic, and that infographic is downloadable from our website and can be mailed out to constituents, to residents, so that they know how to reduce risk. And it's called 3 steps because the very first step is just maintenance, no cost or low cost. The second step is like a little bit more complex. You might have to spend a bit of money. And the last step are bigger things that you might do around your home when you're retrofitting to reduce risk. So just one example is like cleaning out eaves troughs. That's something anybody can do. So it puts some of that flood risk reduction responsibility and ownership on the residents. And then, maybe Chris can speak to the municipal one.
Yeah, actually, and on that, we have implemented a stormwater credit system as well. So for specific property owners, what they can do is they're incentivized to implement stormwater measures on their property, from like as simple as a rain barrel for residential properties to something way more big, I guess more impactful, like a permeable pavement parking lot or something like that. And so within the credit itself, we offer a percentage decrease from the monthly stormwater fee that every property is charged. So that sort of helps it on the private side, knowing that, we can't implement changes directly through private properties. We also partner with Three Green Solutions as well to sort of educate and help bring sort of residents up to speed on how the city's working through our stormwater measures. And so that's another thing on the residential side we do.
Incredible. Thank you so much. I want to share a really huge thank you. Sorry for wrapping up so quickly, but I want to make sure we get our participants and attendees on their way right at 3 o'clock. Huge appreciation for your time today, for all the preparation that went into this really informative session. So thank you so much. And Sandrine and Mo, if you could start screen sharing again, we'll be bringing up a little bit of information now for those folks who may not have grabbed Charlene's links right at the beginning. They are in the chat, but you'll see on the screens the same QR codes will pop up again. You can make sure you're following along on the deck that you want. And I'm actually going to ask for the next slide to let folks know that you might be interested in an upcoming webinar. In just a couple of weeks from now, it is on planning for thermal energy networks, a municipal guide. The webinar will be illustrating how thermal energy networks can operate on the ground and how municipalities can use them to benefit. So the QR code is on the screen. The link will be posted in the chat. It already is. Thank you. And we will leave that on the screen for just an extra moment for anyone who's trying to grab that QR code. And in just one moment, actually, Sandrine, why don't we go ahead and launch the feedback poll right now so that we can grab folks before they head out to their next engagement. We really appreciate feedback on these webinars. It helps inform us when we're planning our future ones. So if you're able to take a moment, it's just 2 questions, fill that out. And in a few weeks from now, you'll be receiving a follow-up email with the recording from today's webinar. And on that recording page, you'll also see links for the resources shared today or referenced today. So we'll make sure to include resources from the Intact Center as well. And thank you so much for your time. It's extremely appreciated that you joined us for today, and we hope you have a lovely afternoon.